Now today I've been laboring over this interview. We've done a lot. We've been doing the show for 12 years. I think this is the most difficult interview I've done, trying to put into perspective what's happened in our country in the last week to the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and then the rioting that's broken out all over the country in subsequent nights, even to last night. So we do what we always do on the show. We call veterans and ask their opinion and their perspective. And we have two veterans, as I said earlier, with over 50 years experience in the U.S. military, covering both the Army and the Navy. And representing the Army today, Colonel Reese Turner, who is a West Point graduate, Army football player, 5 deployments, 2 in Afghanistan, 3 in Iraq, also was served in Haiti, calling in from Louisville, Kentucky. Colonel, how are you today?
Ted, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Hey, thanks so much. And then one of our favorite guests, we've known him since New York City Fleet Week almost 15 years ago when he was aboard the USS Kearsarge. He rose to become a Fleet Master Chief, of which there are only 4. And he was actually at one point, when the Master Chief of the Navy stepped down, the senior enlisted sailor in the entire U.S. Navy, which I learned today. And that is Fleet Master Chief Raymond Kemp, calling in from the Norfolk, Virginia area. Fleet Master Chief, how are you today?
Very well, Ken. Once again, always good to be a part of this show. Thanks for giving us the opportunity.
No, I appreciate being able to talk with both of you gentlemen. Maybe we'll start with Colonel Turner and ask you both just to what is your impression of what happened in the country last week? The killing in Minneapolis by a police officer, George Floyd, during when he was being apprehended, and then the response protests, which were fine, but then the incredible amount of rioting and looting that followed up. Colonel Turner, Reese Turner, what's your thought on that?
Ken, again, thanks for giving me the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be on here with Retired Master Chief. My thoughts have been, it's been very disheartening 3 times throughout my lifetime. I've been in situations where either pulled over or cops that came to my door. Luckily, they did knock before coming to my door with their pistols drawn. So I have experienced, thankfully, not taking my life, but I have experienced what a lot of black men have experienced. What really resounds to me is a systemic issue that has been going on for years that we have to address. And I listened to one of my motivational speakers, Eric Thomas, this morning, and he talked about being committed, and he talked about Dr. King, about how long he was committed for. I think it was like 381 days. But I think what brings the point to me is where our leaders at the government level, at the city level, the governors, the mayors, the police chiefs. It's got to be a collective solution to this systemic problem that has continued to plague us as Americans. So I think we have to work together across color barriers, and we have to work it out together.
And I'd like to ask the same question of Fleet Master Chief Raymond Kemp, which we were talking before the show, and he mentioned how many times he had been apprehended or stopped and mistreated. Master Chief Kemp, tell us a little bit about your perspective on what happened last week and some of the instances that you described to me earlier that were really very unfortunate to hear about.
Sure, Ken. You know, just like the Colonel, as I watched the events play out on television last week, it was disheartening, but I'll admit it was not surprising. I joined the Navy I was born in the 60s, raised in the 70s, joined the Navy in the 80s, and a number so high that I can't even count. I've been pulled over by the police, snatched out of my vehicle, put on the concrete, ankles crossed, hands crossed behind my head, on my knees, until they realized that it wasn't me, until I wasn't that person that fit the description of that vehicle. And I'm talking about from California to Virginia and Washington, D.C. as well. I'll tell you that it was, it appears to me this institutional racism that has been proliferated across our country for at least, for over 400 years is something, as the Colonel said, we absolutely have to do something about it. But regrettably, the cadence is very familiar. Something happens, people get angry, they march, they sit down someplace, they scream and shout, they say there's something's going to happen, but then it really doesn't. And, the time right now, if I could just offer the opportunity for a case for lamentations, if we just take the time and show some true compassion towards one another, some true empathy, and then put some timelines on some solutions, perhaps then we can know justice. That is KNOW, know justice, and then know peace that goes along with that when it is fair and equitably dispensed.
And let's ask Colonel Turner, when you see the violence that's gone on in American cities since the killing of George Floyd, how do we stop that? How do we bring order back to our society so that we can discuss and make positive moves?
What I've seen recently, some of the police chiefs, I think in Houston, Texas, maybe, and also I think Miami, and I think in other cities, I've seen where cops have laid down their whatever they were carrying in their hands, their batons, and they actually have knelt down with some of the protesters. It's actually good to see the rainbow of the protesters that are out there. So I really think that compassion on both sides, whether it's the police officers, whether it's our elected officials, and also we have to come to agreement, come to the table, and let the tempers, because as you know, once violence starts, the aggression starts going, adrenaline starts pumping, it's really hard to stop that. So I think cooler heads prevail, and again, regardless of race, it has to be led by blacks and whites to sit down at the table and say, hey, we have to when something like this happens, and we've seen it in the military, when something like this happens, you have to address it right away. You come up with a solution, you put systems in place so it doesn't happen again, and don't cover up what may have happened in the past. And that's one part of the problem is we're seeing frustration is we see issues over and over and over and over again, but there's nothing done about it. So,
and thank you. Fleet Master Chief Kemp, we talked a little bit about some of how issues like this, racial issues, how to get sailors to work together, live together, and be productive. Tell us a little bit about how you were able to bring people together in the Navy in so many different types of situations.
Well, what I'll tell you, Ken, is that just to echo what the Colonel is saying, that, we're talking about generations of frustration and generations of discrimination that are given voice. What has happened recently, and even if I kind of go back maybe about 10 or 15 years within the Navy, is that there has been a sincere level of communication between various different challenges that we had. I was on board Abraham Lincoln when we brought the first females on board an aircraft carrier after in the early 90s, and we were able to have true voice, true conversations, and be heard by the leadership. So just as the Colonel was saying, that the authorities need to come to the table with those who are being persecuted and have legitimate conversations with the timeline, I believe, is most important, the timeline on resolution. There are many ways to change the dynamic, but the commitment to doing it in a timely fashion is the most important thing, because that measure of commitment is what shows people that there's a sincere level of care. And Ken, I think you've heard me say before that people really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
So it's important that we express that so that we can have a true and lasting change, one that is filled with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And so we only have a few seconds left. Colonel Turner, do you have a final thought for us?
I love it. Leave it over to the Fleet Master Chief. I always respect my NCOs. I hope and pray. In times of adversity, this is when true leadership stands up. And as Fleet Master Chief said, we got to put a timeline to it, and we have to learn and grow through these situations so we become better as people and as Americans.
Okay, and we appreciate Colonel Reese Turner calling in from Louisville, Kentucky, and Fleet Master Chief Ray Kemp. We got about 10 seconds. A final thought.
Black lives matter, and let's do it with peace and not patience.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate both of you calling in and offering your perspective as we do in the show. nothing better than to hear the perspective of veterans. Both of you served our country, I believe, over 30 years, and we appreciate you joining us. Colonel Reese Turner from Louisville, Kentucky, graduate of West Point. Ray Kemp, Fleet Master Chief, calling in from Norfolk, Virginia. Thank you very much, and stay safe, both of you.
Been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ken. Beat Navy.